Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just jump into it. First question comes from Sean, who says this: What could a Carson Schlesinger and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah playing together look like? How impactful could that be to have both of them out there? It would be interesting, right? Because I would wonder how, Jason Tarver would balance that. And if they do come back, I do really hope that we still have Jason Tarver, because I think he's the perfect person to balance that. Carson Schlesinger is probably going to be the mic, which means that you're going to push JOK down to maybe being like a Sam linebacker, but you don't want him to be as limited as that. So I would wonder if the Browns would, because of that, stay in more, like, move their base to be a little bit more athletic since their defensive line's good. Like maybe move Grant Delpit down to playing linebacker more often. I think there's a lot of room to be creative there. And you could be a lot less predictable on defense too, because JOK and Carson Schlesinger can swap roles seamlessly. So yeah, it would be a fantastic treat to have both those guys playing. Now, unfortunately with JOK, he's been out so long, and the nature of his absence is to the point to where even if he does come back, I don't feel comfortable talking about him like he's going to be the same player anymore. Like if we're hypothetically looking at this and looking at what JOK was before he got injured and what Carson Schlesinger is now, I think that would be super interesting. I think if JOK came back from the injury that he has, you're probably going to work him back really slowly. And maybe he gets back to being the full-time Sam, it's really a tragedy, that injury for JOK. And, I held out hope for the longest that it wasn't as bad as maybe it had made to be out to be seen. But yeah, the longer this goes on, the more concerned I am that it is truly just that bad for him. But hopefully, I'm wrong on that. Peter says this: What are 3 things you are most excited to watch going into games now? I appreciate the optimism there. I don't know if I'm excited to watch anything with the Browns right now. Certainly when Shedeur gets out there, I think that would add some excitement, as far as like there will at least be a hope that the games aren't going to be as predictable. Right now, I don't think there's a hope that the Browns games are going to play out any differently with Dillon Gabriel. It's the same thing that you had when you first put Dillon Gabriel out there, right? When Joe Flacco was out there. Browns lose 4 games the same way. And you put Dillon out there, your hope is that you don't lose the games the same way that you've been losing them with Dillon Gabriel, and then, losing them with Joe Flacco with Dillon Gabriel, and then, you lose the same way you've been losing with Dillon Gabriel. And I think, you push Shedeur in, maybe there's some hope that you can win differently. I think it's a little bit more founded than hoping you can win differently with Dillon Gabriel than you did with Joe Flacco. Because at least with Shedeur, the big knock on him apparently is that he doesn't run the offense and he improvises too much. But at this point, are we really going to be opposed to somebody improvising out of the offense when the offense is produced what it's produced? I certainly am not going to clutch my pearls about that. Just not something I care about anymore. Maybe at the beginning of the season where there was a little bit more faith that the system could be successful. Sure. But at this point, do what you want. You know what I mean? So maybe when Shedeur gets out there, there'll be a little bit more excitement. I think watching the rookies develop is another area where you get excited to watch. And just in general, you want to see the defense, despite the fact that this season's completely in the you want to see this defense continue to not give a damn and play really hard regardless. Because one day, hopefully by the time we get over with this offseason, the offense isn't going to be pitiful because the Browns make a lot of moves in the offseason. And you're going to want to pair up what you're seeing with the defense with the good offense. And I think if you do that, you got a recipe for a team to be much better, faster than people anticipate. Chris says this, hey Q, if you were Haslam, do you think it would be in your best interest to fire a coach mid-season knowing it probably isn't the most appealing team to coach? This has been my argument. There are franchises that can survive firing their coach in the middle of the season and it not being a bad look for them. The Browns just aren't one of them. The Browns have burnt their firing coaches in the middle of the season card earlier in the decade, right? In 2014, they fired the coach in the middle of the season. In 2012, they fired the coach in the middle of the season. Hugh Jackson was fired in the middle of the season. The Browns have simply fired too many coaches in the middle of the season to continue to do it without it having a negative effect on how people perceive your job. I do believe you can convince somebody that the Browns' job is not as bad as it looks and that it's actually a good opportunity for somebody. If you're able to get past the point of the stigma that the Cleveland Browns have right now, I think you can convince them, because if you sit somebody down and you say, hey, look, I know what you hear about Jimmy Haslam, but we let Kevin Stefanski finish the year. Jimmy Haslam's not just doing things at his own will. We are controlled pretty normally. And look at the roster. We got Myles Garrett. We got a defense that's ready to go. If you're an offensive guy, you can see an opportunity for you to improve what's there on the offense. You got draft picks that we're going to commit to the offense as well. And because we're going to commit those draft picks to the offense, that means you're going to have a large hand in how these groceries are bought. I think the collaborative process that Andrew Berry offers as a GM, where he is willing to listen to position coaches and coaching about draft selections. I think DePodesta talked about it. He doesn't like the King Scout theory is not something they used in Cleveland, which is to say they weren't just doing stuff because Andrew wanted it to happen. They were doing stuff because that's what they agreed upon to happen, especially in cases like the draft. So if you're a coach and you're hearing to yourself, okay, this GM's willing to collaborate. We do have some good pieces on defense. And yeah, the offense was awful last year, but I'm here to fix the offense. Also, look at the assets that they have to address it. Maybe you're a fan of one of these quarterbacks coming out and the Browns have to pick to go get them. You're seeing a clear recipe to get this team back up where it was just 2 years ago in 2023, where they were 11-win football team despite a lot of different things going wrong. I think the Browns' job is the easiest path to a Coach of the Year award for any head coach in the NFL that chooses to take that role. And I do think if you sit somebody down and you present this job properly, I know it seems like a foreign concept on social media because everybody's so negative on social media. But the reality is that you can paint this in a pretty positive direction. But in order to do that, you have to look at the very least from the outside looking in like an organization that is functioning from football operations, not an organization that's functioning from ownership. And if you fire your coach in the middle of the year, you're sending a big, bright red flag to everybody that, hey, ownership's running the team again. And that's going to not make it so that nobody listens to your pitch. But if you kind of ease people's concerns about that and you say, hey, look, man, we haven't fired it. This organization, since Andrew Berry has been here, has never fired a coach, even a position coach, in the middle of the year. We're not going to do that to you. We have security from Jimmy Haslam that I'm going to be here for. If you can ensure that, I think you can sell that the Browns do have a good opportunity here, because that's the one thing I disagree with most of Browns Twitter on, which is this idea that the Browns' job is going to be the least appealing job on the market. I disagree. I think that this job can appeal to somebody. Now, if you sell it like Brown's Twitter sells it, then yeah, you're not going to sell anybody on this job. But if you sell it the way that it could be sold, which is, hey, look, this team is ready to get fixed as long as you have the answers on offense, you can sell this job to a really strong offensive mind. You know what I mean? I think somebody who's confident in their ability to fix an offense is going to look at what's going on with the Browns offense, say that I could have got more out of it than Kevin got last year, and then also say to themselves, we got draft picks, we got cap space, we're about to get rid of Deshaun Watson. Okay, yeah, this is an opportunity I can succeed with. Like, it wouldn't really surprise many people when I talk to them about the Browns job within like NFL writer circles if the Browns were to be an 11 or 12 win team next year because they got a couple of things right in the draft. And you think that wouldn't be attractive to a head coach or to somebody interviewing for head coaching jobs? I think it will be more attractive, but you got to make it so that the people are willing to hear your pitch. You know, it's not going to be immediately obvious that this is a job that somebody wants to take. You got to sell them on it. And I think that's where it matters if you fire a coach in the middle of the year. I know a lot of times too, people bring up, well, we should fire a coach now so we could get a head start on the coaching search. One, you can do your research on who you might want to hire right now. Nothing is literally stopping you from doing that, whether Kevin's employed or not. You can start the research process. I think that doesn't matter whether Kevin's fired or not. And two, hiring a head coach is not like the draft. Just because you're first doesn't mean that you're going to land a guy that you want. A qualified candidate is going to wait for other offers before they just take the job. Like that's not how this is going to work, right? You know, they're going to wait for opportunities to open up at the end of the season. The Giants aren't going to fill that role before the end of the season. Everybody's going to fill the role, their head coaching roles around the same time, which is during the playoffs or immediately after the playoffs, before the Senior Bowl. Well, immediately after the conference championship game, but before the Senior Bowl, more than likely, everybody fills their positions there unless they're waiting for somebody who's coaching in the Super Bowl right now. So I don't really think that firing your coach midseason is going to help you. And I think in the long run, it's just going to hurt you because it's going to make people not want to listen to a pitch that I think that maybe otherwise they might be willing to listen to. Get to the next question here. Next question comes from Stracker, who says, thanks for keeping me sane this year, Q. Do you think the Browns are losing creativity different every week in order to tank and making it look like tanking? No. I think Kevin's burnt out. That's my thing. Like, if you want my theory on this, I think Kevin's burnt out. I think 2024 and 2025 burnt them out. And there's really no way, if you're the Browns, to give that man the year off that he needs in order to figure out what he is as a head coach going forward. I think eventually Kevin's going to pop up again and be a good head coach if he gets fired this offseason. But the reality is, I'm watching this offense, I'm looking at it, and I'm seeing somebody who used to be good at this not be good at this anymore, and I think he's burnt out. You know, I think he's been trying to reinvent the wheel the last couple of years. It hasn't worked out, and now he's burnt out. You know, that's really where I sit on that, and I don't know if you can pass on that. Right. I don't know if you can continue to hope that he's going to unburn himself out while having the job. You know, it kind of reminds me, and I know people have brought this up about the Mike Vrabel thing, right? Where it's like, hey, well, what if Kevin Stefanski's situation is a lot like Mike Vrabel? And, you know, the resumes are somewhat similar between the two. I think Vrabel has had more postseason success than Kevin. But I think the thing that people forget, and it's also the thing that people forget with Baker Mayfield, is Mike Vrabel didn't get fired from the Titans and then immediately take the New England job. Mike Vrabel got fired from the Titans, took a year off as a consultant for the Cleveland Browns, and then took the New England job. And the reason that's important is because Mike Vrabel probably needed the year off to not be burnt out, because at the end of his Titans run, he looked like he was burnt out, right? So, the same thing happened with Baker Mayfield. Where he wasn't burnt out. He needed to be matured. But, that I think he needs time to not be a head coach in the NFL. And that means he can't be the head coach here because I think we burnt him out. I think everything that happened the last 2 years burnt that man out. That's my prevailing theory. Next question comes from Luke, who says this. Luke says, could this be Gabriel's last game if he plays poorly? I certainly think so. Right. After this game, if they keep putting Gabriel out there, it looks more and more suspicious. I think 6 games is a strong sample to get. I think you've seen what he could bring to the table positively. You've seen what he can bring to the table negatively. And also, in 6 weeks, you would expect to see something that would make you believe that he could be, maybe a starting caliber quarterback, if that's the hope. You haven't seen that at all. So, after this week, if it looks bad, I think you got to move on and play Shedeur after that, just to see what Shedeur has. Now, I don't have the information that they have in the building, right? For all I know, Shedeur might be throwing 4 interceptions in scout team practices, or for all I know, Shedeur might be throwing touchdowns on touchdowns in scout team practices, and he's killing it. Either way, you get to like December and Shedeur hasn't played, you might as well play him just to let people know what it looks like, even if it doesn't look good, right? Like, you're at that point, that's the deadline to show your work on this whole thing, because I can't imagine this Dillon Gabriel thing continuing much longer after this game. Big Griff says this. You saying, Q, saying we go to quarterback on our first pick. If the Jags are sitting at 12 to 15, could you see us trying to trade up for Jordan Tyson or Carnell Tate, a true X guy? Or do you think we be okay waiting for more of a slot guy? Like, I don't want to categorize. I think there are guys there. David Boston. Is it David Boston or is it Devin Boston? One of them Bostons from Washington. I think one of them not one of them. I think Boston has a father in the NFL, and I keep confusing whether it's David Boston, the son, or is David Boston the dad. But he's 6'5", right? A go up and get him type player. There are different varieties of wide receivers available based on where you're going to pick. And I wouldn't just limit it there. And look, Mekhi Lemon, like, I think people are sleeping on him just because he's short and not that big. But Mekhi Lemon's just as much as a true X guy in college, at least, as the other two have been this year. I mean, have you seen some of the plays Mekhi Lemon has come down with this season for USC? Sometimes people get fixated on height, but then you get a 6'5" guy who don't play like he's 6'5", he play like he's 5'10", and it just frustrates you. Mekhi Lemon plays tall. You know what I mean? Like, he goes up and get him. So I wouldn't sleep on that. And there's a lot of go up and get him type guys. Elijah Surratt that you can get later in the draft. Omar Cooper. Look, I think the Browns should come out this draft with 2 wide receivers. Not in the first round, obviously, but 2 wide receivers at some point. Like, maybe your 3rd round pick and your 1st round pick should be wide receivers, or your first round pick should be wide receivers. Especially if you're going to go out and get Mendoza, you should probably get one of them IU wide receivers, in my opinion. All right. Next question comes from Derek, who says this. Q, no left tackle, questions at right tackle, no bona fide playmaker at wide receiver. Are the Browns set up for a first-year quarterback to succeed? Well, one, you can build it around a quarterback over multiple years. You draft somebody at number 1 or number 2 or number 3, number 4, you draft somebody in the first round. It's a 5-year contract. It's not a 1-year contract. So you don't have to have it all work out and come together in the first year of that quarterback's deal. But you do also have tools like free agency. You do also have tools like the draft to be able to address needs. Are you going to fix everything in one offseason? No. The offensive line is likely going to be a 2-season rebuild. But just because you haven't fixed everything, does that mean that you can't be better than you are right now, or that you can't be successful? That no, you can also be successful while also having holes on the roster, right? You can look at plenty of teams that have holes on their roster that find success because they're able to outplay some of those holes on their roster. And if the Browns do hit on quarterback, it's going to be a lot easier to do that, especially with the defense that they have. Josh says this: hey Q, as far as of right now, it seems that Kevin is on his way out. If the Browns move on from his coaching staff, how would this affect the quarterback room? I just don't see a new staff wanting to develop quarterbacks, Sanders and Gabriel. They didn't draft, especially when they have draft capital to get their guy in 2026. Well, it depends on what they think of Sanders and Gabriel, right? I think that's going to be the first thing. It also matters, is Andrew Berry going to be sticking around? If Andrew Berry sticks around, then, there's going to be a perspective in the building that might want to keep one of those guys, right? So that's a fluid situation, but it really depends on who they hire and what their opinion is of Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur. Because the opinion that people had of Shedeur, that he was not worthy of being drafted in the first round or maybe even in day 2 of the draft, was not an uncommon one we saw in NFL front offices or NFL coaching staffs. We found out that was actually a common opinion because that's where he ended up going. And the opinion that Dillon Gabriel was worth a 3rd or 4th round pick, we found out was not uncommon amongst front office people and coaches as well, right? There was a market there for Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd, 4th round. So it's not a guarantee just because you move on from Kevin that the next guy isn't going to be somebody who was one of those coaches who did want one of those guys in the draft. So, you just got to see who you hire and what their opinion is. We're going to get on with more Q&A questions, but I got to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. All right, so it's that time where I do my picks for the week on Sleeper. Make sure you want to join the fun. You use promo code WORSTTAKE, get a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE if you're in an eligible state. Now, my picks this week, we won last week. I'm a little confident, so I added an extra one in there just for the hell of it. Remember, when it comes to contests like this, always play them responsibly. What I think is going to happen this week, I think Lamar Jackson, they say his combined pass and rushing yards number 250. I think he'll get above that. Jerry Jeudy, I'm going with the anytime touchdown on Jerry Jeudy. I'm going with over 3.5 receptions for Jerry Jeudy. Dillon Gabriel, longest rush, 7.5. And Quincy Judkins over 2 receptions. Look, this was a tough week to come up with picks. I'm not even going to lie. Because I did not want to go with production picks because I'm not very confident in how this offense is going to look. So I tried to stick to picks that are more about, for the Browns at least, either like an individual moment, like a longest run, or things like how many times do you get a reception, right? I don't know how many yards these receptions are going to go for, but I do think that will happen. And then I threw in the anytime touchdown there for Jeudy just because, it makes sense. They've been emphasizing him more and more into the offense. It makes sense for them to get him the ball again. And then Lamar Jackson, 250 yards total. I think Lamar's probably going to have a big day here. I just don't anticipate the Browns offense to be able to keep Lamar off the field long enough to where it starts to not matter. Well, where him getting like all these extra swings at it isn't going to start mattering. So that's my picks. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But if you want to join the fun, make sure you join Sleeper and use my promo code WORSTTAKE to get a 100% match on up to $100. This question comes from ULUS, says, are we sure Deshaun is washed? Yeah, I'm pretty sure Deshaun's washed, but I know it's a small sample size. But before he was out in 2023 with that shoulder injury, he had a few performances like the Titans game, the comeback win versus Ravens that showed flashes that he was slowly coming back. And then that playoff game versus the Texans happened, and no QB has looked good in the system since. I know no one wants to see him, but I feel like it's too early to give up on him. It's tough because I have faith in Shedeur and still want to see him. Okay. So let's play the game of like, let's say that it's Kevin's fault that Deshaun did not look like Deshaun in 2022 and 2023. And like, because that's been a relitigation that some people have been doing. The Browns offense, as of late has been bad. I would argue these problems didn't exist in 2022 and 2023 to the extent that they exist now. The Browns offensive line was fine in those 2 years, and the Browns had weapons at wide receiver in those 2 years. So like retroactively using the arguments of like, oh, the offense is killing Deshaun in 2024 and killing Deshaun now, to apply it to like 2022 and 2023, I find to be wrong, because we're talking about issues that popped up with Kevin and popped up with the roster that are specific to 2024 and 25. But I digress. Let's imagine that that's the case, right? Deshaun is a quarterback who's going to be 30, who's coming off of a throwing shoulder surgery injury that ended his season and 2 Achilles tears. It ain't even about the coaching anymore. It's about his physical body, right? Like that was the biggest issue with Deshaun in 2023, was that he wasn't available for most that year because he kept getting injured. Before it was the shoulder injury that took him out, there was like that rotator cuff thing that was going on with him. Just was not staying together physically. Comes back in 2024, pops his Achilles in the offseason again. So the injury rate for this guy has been astronomical as he's inched towards the age of 30. And now we're talking about a 30-year-old quarterback who missed 2 years of football, and looks like those 2 years of football that he missed really hurt him. You also have the fact that he is a quarterback who does rely a bit on his athletic ability, that's had 2 Achilles tears in less than 365 days, on top of the fact that this guy never really looked like he recovered from having his throwing shoulder be destroyed in 2023. Even if the argument wasn't that Kevin Stefanski was a bad offensive coordinator for Deshaun Watson, you got to look at his physical body at this point and just have no interest in seeing him at this point. Like he's legitimately been destroyed. Everything that brought you to the table on Deshaun Watson has suffered a season-ending injury. Think about that. Like, you wanted Deshaun Watson because you thought he had this accurate arm. Well, his shoulder got destroyed, and now his arm don't look the same. Okay, cool. But Deshaun's still a really good athlete. You can lean on him as an athlete. Well, he popped his Achilles. And wait a minute. He popped his Achilles again. You see what I mean? And like, don't underestimate, too, how a popped Achilles is going to affect your explosion when trying to throw a football. Like Achilles pop, what that does is it limits your explosion, right? It's one of those things that cuts out how explosive you can be. And we think of explosions like, oh, you're cutting left and right and you're running, but you need a lot of explosion to create torque to throw the football. So the shoulder is going to be affected by the 2 Achilles injuries. He is physically at the point to where you just can't rely on him anymore. So that's why it doesn't matter if you think Kevin was the problem in 2024 with him. It's over. His body just has never recovered. His arm has never recovered from that original injury. And now he has 2 Achilles tears. I'm not optimistic about what that's going to look like. And if you listen to the Browns talk about it, they don't sound optimistic either. That's where we are, unfortunately. All right. Based Elk says, wouldn't it make more sense to give Stefanski the pieces first? I think you give him the pieces first, and it fails. It makes more sense to hire him then. At worst, you have a good roster, but you could hire a new staff instead of firing a proven coach for having the most wins in a decade in all of his accolades. You could also potentially hire someone who is proven and would not likely run into the same problems with this roster. Here's my argument against, hey, he doesn't have the horses, right? Because that's been the main argument for Kevin Stefanski. is that he doesn't have the horses. And I would agree. If Kevin Stefanski had a great roster around him, he'd be able to put together a good offense. But that's the thing, isn't it? If he had a great roster around him, I believe he would put together a good offense. Not a great offense, not an excellent offense, but a good one if he had a great roster. And that's the problem, right? At the end of the day, Kevin's supposed to be able to demonstrate that he puts a floor on this football team, right? That's what good coaches do, is they give you a floor. And that's the thing that even in the seasons where Kevin didn't make the playoffs, I gave him a ton of credit for, because he gave this football team a floor. In 2021, I thought he did a great job of giving this football team a floor. In 2022, I thought he did a great job of giving this football team a floor, right? In between the two seasons where they made the playoffs, you could argue that they demonstrated that they have a floor that they're going to fall to. 2024, there's been no floor. The floor has been hell. In 2025, there's been no floor. The floor has been hell. I understand and am sympathetic to the idea that he does not have the horses. But at some point, Kevin Stefanski's job is to make do with what you got and to do more with it than what he has. There is no floor on this team. And yeah, the roster's not great, but I'm telling you right now, the roster's not this goddamn bad. Like, I'm sorry, right? It's just not as bad as they look out there on Sundays. You know, they still have two Pro Bowlers at the wide receiver, right? They have David Njoku, tight end. They have Jerry Jeudy, right? Who, when you throw the ball to him, he proved last week can still produce at a level that you would want a upper tier wide receiver to produce at. You also have Harold Fanon, who's been one of the better receivers in the draft, regardless of position, tight end, wide receiver. He's one of the higher producers in this year's draft class. You also have Quincy Judkins. I understand the offensive line is not amazing, but it's not the worst offensive line in the NFL. And hell, even Dylan Gabriel, or whoever you want to throw out there at quarterback, they've had Joe Flacco, they got Dylan Gabriel. We'll see what Shador is when Shador gets out there. But I got news for people. Joe Flacco wasn't the worst quarterback in the league. And right now, Dylan Gabriel is not the worst quarterback in the NFL. There are like three other quarterbacks who are objectively worse than Dylan Gabriel, but yet we are the worst offense in the NFL. Yeah, Kevin doesn't have the horses, but at some point, when you are a head coach, you're going to be asked to put a floor on what you have, because you could put pieces in the right place to be successful. Kevin is demonstrating right now that he is somebody who can facilitate a good roster. Like, he's competent enough that if you give him good, he'll get you good. But what he's not demonstrating is that he's able to manufacture a floor for a football team, which is what we thought Kevin was before these last two seasons. So I get the argument, but I think when you make that argument, we're missing the point that, like, it's not Kevin's job just to be good when the things are good. Kevin's job is also to put a floor on this team so that things only get but so bad. And if we're looking at the roster the Browns have right now, I don't think with the straight face I can say, and maybe you feel like you can say it, but I don't think with the straight face I can say, and many people around the league can say, that this is the best that you can get out this roster. I think that there's a lot of different coaches that can get more out this roster offensively than what we've gotten out of it from Kevin. You know, and that's unfortunate. You know, I like Kevin, but if Kevin can't get the job done, can't put a floor on the team, then what are we talking about here, right? You know what I mean? So much is being put into this argument about if Kevin has the horses or not, but he should be also judged on his ability to be able to put a floor on the team when he doesn't have the horses. And that's what brought us to the table. If that's not there anymore, then what we eating? Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.